and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who can see for miles, as long as those miles are underground.
Tim Longo.
Yes, you like to dig out those long tunnels in your Minecraft mines. I'm guessing. I don't know. I really don't know what to expect.
I'll explain my... that's one of my topics, I think, is I wanted to share my what has evolved into, I think, my survival genre game approach that I've realized is the same thing I do in most of these games. So anyway.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, we'll get to that after this announcement. One of the things we mentioned 2 weeks ago, apologies for missing last week, we are both busy, is that we will be opening up the server to people who request through Discord. I just message me privately. You can find my username on the Discord. And, I want to remind people that there may be children on this server. In fact, we're expecting to send an invite to a child. So please keep that in mind. If you're putting up signs or making public art, please make it appropriate for children. We're going to keep the server up at least until Defeating Games for Charity, when I believe Lost Lake is going to give a tour. Maybe I don't know what he's planning. That's a
I didn't know that.
I
guess I missed that. That's awesome. What a great idea.
Yeah, so he's one of the people who's asked to be invited in, and just generally kind of be polite. I cannot promise that it will persist much longer after Defeating Games for Charity, maybe a little while after that, but I'm already spending money on this podcast every month. I'm not going to add a realm to that cost for very long, but I'll leave it up for a little while so people can get in there and play. And we thought, since people are going to be on break, now would be a good time to open it up and let people go in. And I've kind of done my own approach to what I'm going to do. So, I'm to the point where I'm like, well, I don't really know what to do next. So it's probably a good time to let other people come in.
I know what we need to do.
And honestly, show me, because what do I know? Anyway, that maybe brings us right to what we should be doing in the survival genre. Let's get to that, Tim.
You mean as far as my approach, or? Mm. Yeah,
or even just talking about the thing generally, from a macro level, and then we can maybe dial into how that affects your play.
Yeah. I mean, I was just going to add on the server thing. Like, is it possible that if somebody wants it to persist, you could transfer it to somebody? And then
I have no idea. So we can talk about
probably save it off later. Yeah. If somebody does get, the thing about these servers and these worlds is that at some point people get pretty attached and invested. So. Obviously they could probably save off local copies if people really wanted to keep going that way, but it's not as fun. But anyway, it does cost. So yeah, we didn't sign up for that. Thank you for paying as you are so far, even for the few months. But yeah, I mean, as I said in the first episode, wait, is this our third episode? No, second episode.
Second episode, yeah.
As I said in the first episode, this genre is, it's close. It might be my favorite genre now, subgenre, if you will. And so I've played quite a few of them, and I've spent a lot of time in a lot of them. And it's, as a genre, one thing that sort of occurred to me. So there are two separate topics we talked about in pre-show, but I'll kind of partner them a little bit. One is that, and as I was talking, I don't have the timeline open. I should have thought of that. The Minecraft development timeline open, or release timeline open. But as I talked about in the first episode, it kind of gave some examples of things that were added to the game over time once it had basically been in alpha, and how very unique of a concept that was at the time for a paid, essentially a live game that doesn't have a subscription. MMOs being the dominant quote unquote live genre at the time. Now they're everywhere in different genres, first person shooters, whatever. Everyone does it now. Every genre does it. But one thing that occurred to me as we've been playing for the podcast is that there's this sort of we talk about it a lot in our day-to-day jobs. We've talked about it from time to time on the podcast, of just this concept of how important constant iteration and improvement is in even developing a game before it goes to the public. And then after it goes to the public, even more so. And that Minecraft kind of did, I think, lay the groundwork for a lot of that mentality, and how similar that is to what game development, I think, good game development should be. And an example that you and I were talking about when we were, playing, we actually were both on the server last night together, and also on Discord. And you were asking about the clock, and I was like, yeah, that's right, there is a clock. Why would they? And then it kind of occurred to me, it's like, yeah, there's times when you're below ground when you really probably want to know what time it is above ground, because you can't see see up there,
the sky,
right?
Yeah.
So, and you could be very deep at times, right?
Oh,
and you might.
Yes, you could.
Yeah, so you might need to plan your travel time, right, to be below ground during the night and then above ground during the day. Those sorts of things. But that was a kind of a kernel of a concept for me, in that, there was a point when that need, it's very much the necessity being the mother of invention. There was that point when either the community, the players, or the developers realized, hey, we didn't originally think of a clock. We didn't probably know that we needed one, but the need arose, and so we implemented one.
Yeah.
And that kind of like that survival, and then what's even more meta for me,
which is why design documents are an inferior way to
make exactly. It's like, oh, we didn't put the clock in the design doc. Oh, well, we're not going to make one.
Right.
Well, what? Why? What does that matter?
Yeah.
So you're not shipping the design doc. It's like, what is on screen and what is the need? And then what's even more meta for me is that the survival genre itself is also, as you're playing the game as a player, mirrors that same layered effect, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm here. I have found copper. I need to do the next thing to get me the next sort of layer of opportunities, I'll say abstractly. So I'm going to seek out iron or whatever it is. Like, you set this goal, and it's this very iterative process of expanding your, as a player and as I'll say, survivor in the world, expanding your opportunity space. Yeah. So it like works on these three layers very nicely. And I'm kind of wondering, I had never thought about this, even though I have played these games for so many hours. I'm wondering if that's one of the reasons that as a genre it's hit so big, is because it's kind of the fundamentals of it every human will get. And there's this sort of like sense of drive that isn't based on story. It's not based on a quest. It's not based on some designer's, specific linear thrust to give the player. It's like, no, I'm a player and I'm just motivated the way that I see fit to survive the world, or expand my options.
It lends itself really well to, exploratory game making, where, you decide on a character you're going to put in the world and like what their first verb is going to be. And then the next thing you're like, okay, well that yields me this. What does that mean? And when I see yields me, it doesn't mean necessarily a resource. The verb could be shoot, right? So it's like, well, I need something to shoot at, right? And or I need to be able to move so that, I can avoid the shots coming at me. And like, these are the, the sorts of things that happen when you're exploring gameplay. I think of like, I don't think we talked to David Brevik about this, but after our interview, even that, he was doing some game development of his own, a 2D sort of side thing. It wasn't a scroller really. It was kind of an exploratory game. I forget the title.
He did mention that. Yeah, I think I remember that.
But he was very kind of just exploring what it could be next. Like, he didn't have a design doc. He was just like, okay, well, now I'm going to add this, and, which is when you're working alone, in particular, can be the way to go as well.
Just it's like what
just
makes
start
sense.
Going. Like, don't start off trying to make, whatever. So, some game you love, just start with something basic and see what you feel like you need next. And it lends itself to that. And you can see that right in the sort of start of the game. I have a kind of counter question to you though, which is, I don't really know what the opportunities that have opened up to me are. So I have scads of copper. I have so much copper. Most of it unrefined because, I've been busy with iron and all that stuff. I made a couple of doors and they turned green, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah,
But
that's neat.
other than that, I haven't really had a use for copper. Like, I don't know what I would use it for. And so it's one of the things that's happened to me, we noticed, and we're talking about the fact that they've added in some, like, you should try, kinds of messages in the settings pages. Try doing this, try doing that. Well, for them, it's like, try getting a cow. I'm like, well, my goal right now is digging deeper just out of curiosity because I don't know what else to do. So I'm just digging like crazy. I feel like, so how do you kind of guide the player, I guess, or and maybe you just don't, right? I mean, I don't know.
I think that for me, and again, haven't made one of these games before, but played a lot of them. But also, I guess, as a game developer, the things that I dissect, like, I think it's fair, and I've already talked. There's also another big element of these games that I think is super important. Whether you look things up online or not, there still needs to be a sense of mystery and the unknown, right? And I don't mean like from a spooky perspective, just like, but to your point, what are my opportunities? What will come my way? And what they usually do is they provide an obstacle of some kind to you, and often that's enemies, surviving at night. Like, the other example I'll give is like, I need a bed because I don't want to keep spawning at my original spawn point, right? So you seek out, okay, I need to figure out how to make a bed. Or you get wool somehow, accidentally maybe, or intentionally, and then it gives you the recipe and you're like, okay, I didn't know I could make a bed. So to your point on copper, it's like, I think there's the spatial exploration side of these games. But for me, and the reason I don't actually go online, like Valheim, I was religious about not looking anything up, because every new discovery of something that I didn't know the game did, or opportunity that I was going to get, was a joyous moment. Because it's like, oh my God, I can't believe they're letting me do this, or that I can do this now. And that they just had actually this last year a big update, and that continues to be the case, where they're still adding kind of just amazing things that you just didn't anticipate. But the other layer of exploration is essentially finding a new thing, material, because each new element of something is going to give you a new recipe, and that is a new opportunity. So to your point, you might have a lot of copper, you don't know what to do with it yet, but there's some critical element that goes with copper, or various elements, that will change your perception of what copper's value is. Like, while we were online, you were talking about gold, right? You made a gold pickaxe, and you're like, well, that was
a mistake.
Yeah. But gold has a really important role to play in the game. It's just maybe not the way you think. And so that drives some players, and it doesn't drive others. It's like, some people just want to know.
Yeah.
And I've said last episode, I'm a little worried about how handholdy they are becoming with this game, because there's a lot more automation, a lot more recipes are given to you very easily. In fact, I think they call it auto recipe or auto crafting. So I'm a little bit like, ugh, but I think they're trying to make it more usable game for more people. So I get it. But there was just something to placing each item in the grid in the shape of the pickaxe that I loved. It's like, okay, I'm really making this pickaxe, but now it's all automated, unfortunately. But anyway, so yeah.
I mean, so there may be a degree to which I should be experimenting more with the crafting table, especially with something like copper, where I have so much copper that I could literally just be like, well, let me try this pattern with just copper, or let me try this pattern with copper, and maybe I can build a computer. I don't know. But
well, you had redstone, you said, right?
I do have some redstone. I mean, I know what redstone is generally, because I remember. I mean, not that I ever did anything with it, so I don't kind of like know how you would make that work. But maybe it's like, oh, I need that, the copper to make. I would think you would use iron for mining, but maybe you need a certain amount of copper and mine tracks to make them go or something like that. I mean, I could see something like that, but I'm not going to do any of that. That so does not interest me. I like moving in the world myself and making the world easier for me to move in. Like by putting stairs down and things like that. I'm very like meticulous about when I'm digging deeper. It's like I'm just carving away layers so I can put down stairs so that I can easily get back, and things like that. I don't like to jump. So I can have my own approaches to the game, but I also don't like. There's a degree which I'm like, well, sure, I'll probably find more stuff, but I'm missing out a lot on this kind of possibility space exploration, I think, as a result.
Yeah, it is like we've talked about, I think, before we even started playing the game. One of your criticisms, I believe, from playing it back in the day is that, it is a very self-motivated game. Like you do have to kind of make your own goals and fun. That was one of my other topics, is sort of like the basically like projects you give yourself, like I get really bogged down into building my perfecting what I want my base to be and stuff. And that usually eats up a lot of time because I give myself this project of like, okay, I want to make this. And I get kind of OCD about it, but
yeah. Whereas I'm like, okay, slap up some walls and a ceiling. Good. Now I'm going to dig down for a while. Oh, wow. I've gotten pretty far away from that original room. I guess just carve out another room here and put some new things in there, chests and a crafting table. Like I put
totally different
approach. Put a lot of doors in because I don't want things to sneak up on me. In fact, I had a really obnoxious death or near death, I guess, because I came out a door into a space that also you could only get into through a door, and there were skeletons there. And the whole area is well lit. I'm like, what gives? That's not. How did they get in here? Sometimes there's bats in there. I'm like, how did they get in here? There's no way in here.
Yeah, that's odd. There are some behaviors like that I think are. There's some new enemies too that I haven't seen before that actually surprised me too. There's these flying creatures that I had made walls, but I had some holes in my roof intentionally. And they just came in. I'll give you one hint. I'm on top of a mountain, so
okay.
And so I can explain why and all that. But so yeah, I mean, it's interesting that they're adding in things to make some of the assumptions that Minecraft players have change. It's like, oh, I'm going to be safe if I do this. It's like, oh no longer. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like my point about like acquiring new things is like the thing that I love about the genre to some degree is that, because I'm an explorer player type primarily, is exploring physically also by nature of that within these games, especially one that's seed based, also allows me to explore from a material standpoint, because the further I go, the more explore, the more biomes I go to, the more elements I will get that will give me more recipes and more opportunities. And that's just sort of like a virtuous cycle kind of thing. But if you aren't seeking out new materials to go with your copper that change what copper means to you, then yeah, you're going to hit these walls and you're going to be like, I've spent all this time mining copper and I have no use for it. But therein for me still lies when you do find that thing that changes copper as a variable for you. It is such a revelatory moment for me, at least, where it's like, oh wow, I can now. Redstone was sort of like the ultimate example back in the old days of like, oh my God, they added redstone. What? Oh no, I have a switch now. Oh, I have a pressure plate. It's like all these things, and people just were like, what could I do with this? And now people are powering their houses, and there's lights and traps, and you use those traps against other players. When our kid and I were playing in the same world, they were off doing their thing, and I was basically creating a dungeon. We were in creative mode, but I was like, I had kind of made this secret passage, and then I had all these like traps and all these like, and then I would have my kid come over and like, it was like game
Try
design.
To get to me.
Yeah, it was level design for me, So again, that was a very self-motivated project, but it allowed me to do that. So I don't know. It's such a I think it presses so many of my particular buttons that I didn't really realize, and that Minecraft really was the genesis of that for me. That maybe for me as a player type, it's perfect, hand in glove kind of situation, and I can totally see how it isn't for everybody. Because there isn't, unless like one of the goals that I set, and you ask like, what is the point now, other than living, quote unquote, in this world and, growing your garden bigger and getting more plants or whatever. One easy goal we could give ourselves is to get to the nether.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And then it's like, if we just set that, I'm not saying we have to do this, but if we just set that goal, and I think Artemis did the same thing for his stream, we just set that goal. In order to do that successfully, you have to do a lot of stuff. You have to get to diamond, basically. You have to figure out how to make a portal. You have to get the stuff to make the portal, and it just kind of cascades from there. And then once you go in, you're like, okay, now there's a whole nother set of materials. So yeah, it just kind of cascades from there.
So the thing, I guess, is like, but how would I know there's a nether? Right? I mean, is kind of where I'm at. Like, that's kind of where the, and I guess you kind of stumble upon things, you try things, and like, as a player type, I'm very like, no, you're here to entertain me. I didn't come here to entertain myself, right? So that's kind of like, that's just how I'm different as a player. And it's because it's, so often, when I'm working, it's like, well, I actually have to figure out all the things, right? That's my job, is to figure out the things. And, it's, when my leisure time, it's more like, you know what? Just, sure. A list of all these things I should do, sure. A map with lots of spots on it. Yeah, cool.
That's why you like the question marks in Ubisoft games.
I do. And when I, the other thing that happens to me frequently is in games where you can have large periods of self-directed play, like Breath of the Wild, I drop off of them.
Yeah.
I was all gung-ho. I'm like, I'm going to go, find all the stuff in this corner of the map. And then at a certain point, it got very difficult. There was a creature I was having a trouble beating. And I was finally like, I don't know. I mean, I didn't like consciously decide. I just never went back to it, and I was just like, oh, I can't do the thing I decided to do. Oh, well, that was kind of the end of it, and, so, I don't know. I mean, I could just do the 4 beasts or whatever and try to, finish the game.
No, I think,
but it doesn't feel like in the spirit of the thing.
No, I think you're totally right. I think, and it is a really fascinating contrast between the two of us for that kind of stuff. Because, I'm trying to think like Breath of the Wild versus a Ubisoft game, the Breath of the Wild being way more sandboxy and way more, and I guess the second one, which I haven't played, goes even further with all of the sort of systems and physics and mechanics and building and crafting and stuff. But
I mean, I will say I have way more delight, in playing something like Breath of the Wild, but I have trouble.
There's an investment.
Yeah, I have trouble sustaining it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, and I think there's no real, not that this is a sort of debate per se, because it's like every player's different. I'm not trying to convince you of one of my favorite genres, but I guess the interesting thing about these sorts of games, Minecraft being maybe the sort of like the purest version, I guess I'll say, because of the voxels, which we should talk about too, is like you said, like it's really interesting comment, because you said, I'm not here to entertain myself. I want you to entertain me. And I guess my devil's advocate point is they actually are entertaining you through a different means than is maybe normal games do. But to your point, if you don't want to, if you're not in the mood or have the energy to, I don't want to say invest, because I don't want to say it in kind of a negative way, because I think everyone invests whatever they want to in games. It's a pastime. It's not a job. Then, it just isn't for everybody, and that's okay.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
I mean, there's
I definitely, I see the value in them. It's just, I mean, it's just the thing that I don't, and it's not even that I mean, because the other night when we were playing, like, I spent like an hour and a half just making a very long, deep staircase. Like,
yeah.
and it's very deep. Like, I looked down the
The,
staircase from the top. I was like, oh my God, that really took me a while, didn't it? And I went through, I don't know how many iron pickaxes to make it. And like, I'm getting to the point where I'm like, well, pretty soon I'm going to have to go find more iron so I can find more pickaxes so I can go even further down my giant, deep staircase. Kind of reminds me of like Annihilation. Not Annihilation. Yeah, the book, not the movie, doesn't have some of the stuff that was in the book. I was like this.
oh, I was like I wasn't sure which one you were talking about.
Yeah, I meant the book because there's this thing there's this tunneling crawler thing in the book that's not really represented in the movie, which just like kind of infinitely screws down into the earth. It's like doing this staircase that goes down into the earth, and this is kind of what I'm doing, except it's not spiraling, it's just kind of straight. I do kind of vaguely know that in that direction there is a mountain, and I've tried to get to that mountain other ways and been stymied. And maybe we can kind of get into some of the generation stuff, and kind of talk about stories as a way to get there. Like, I know there's a mountain, let's say to my east. I don't know what direction is which, but like, let's just say to the east from where I set up camp on this kind of little hill. There's like a pond, and then I can see this town across a river over there and into the desert, and like a desert town. But there's this big mountain to the east, say, and the town's to the north. I don't actually even know what's to the south. Oh, there's to the south, there's kind of a huge gouge in the earth, which goes down to lava. Like, I can see the lava from up above. So I'm like, well, I can't go that direction. So one of the things that's happened to me is that I dug down quite a ways, and I was like, okay, I'm probably down below enough that now I could tunnel to the mountain, just going kind of more or less due east. And I started doing that, and I came across what I've been thinking of as a abandoned dwarven outpost or something. Yeah, sort of. I mean, but it's also got these huge deep caverns. And it's always crawling with monsters, and I go there sometimes, and it's just like, oh yeah, there's more monsters here now. I found a gelatinous cube there. I was like, oh, I didn't know they had those. Luckily, it couldn't get to me. There were a lot of skeletons. One shot me off what I was thinking of as a bridge. That meant I fell into that very, very, very deep cavern and into lava. That was a really lousy death, because I'm pretty sure that I had just started playing. I'm like, oh, let me go over there again. I'm not sure I explored all of it. I had I had to dig down quite a bit, because I dug through a hole, but I could see that there were structures in there. And I was like, okay, well, I can't get there from here, because I'm like, it's just a sheer cliff. So I like walled it back up and put a torch there, and like, so I would remember, like, okay, I built this here. I think I leave holes usually so I can see, so that I don't actually, so I go up and there's a hole and there's nothing behind it. I'm like, okay, I know that's not safe. That's kind of a signal to myself. So I was like, oh, so I started tunneling more, and then I came across the chasm again, in a different direction. I'm like, okay, I have to kind of go south, and like, oh, what I ran into was like these tall posts, I guess. Like, they were 4x4 wood plank pillars in the earth, and then I could see underground. Yeah, and I was like, oh, and it goes down, so I got to get lower to where these things start, to get to the actual thing. So I made like this, spiraling staircase to get down to that. I mean, it was only kind of like, I don't know, 270 degrees. It didn't take long to get to the bottom, but it was like, okay, I have to actually go south, and then I have to turn back east, and then turn back north, and hopefully I'm kind of close to where this thing ends up, and I kind of was. So it's just like, and then I finally got there, and it was Skeleton City. I did find a ton of webs and stuff in there. Like, I don't know if at some point they just were, I don't know if spiders just kick out webs every now and again. I don't know how that happens, but there was a room that was just full of cobwebs. So I like took all of that and like, oh, I've got all this string now. Occasionally there were mine carts with chests in them that had stuff, and it was just weird. I was just like, what is this? Like, And then,
isn't it amazing though?
well, it's like the thing is that the algorithm's okay, in that it places these kind of curios, but they don't seem very well motivated. Like I couldn't determine a comprehensible rationale for how it was built. And so I couldn't tell myself a story about this space other than abandoned, right? I mean, that's not much as stories go, right? So it kind of was like, so it left my narrative, like, because I'm such a reader and all that stuff, like it left my narrative brain like, I want there to be a story here that I can kind of discover. And the story is just, here's a bunch of stuff somebody left behind. Like, there's no, like, I didn't come across a throne room and go like, oh, this is where the king sat, like, or anything, the only room I kind of came across that was like, okay, this sort of makes sense, is this web area, and I was like, well, I'm like, this could have just been made after they left. Like, because I don't understand the rules about what makes webs appear. I don't really know. And then there was stuff that they didn't mine that was right there. So like, I was like, oh, I can just mine this iron that's like right on the side of this hallway. Like, why didn't they mine everything out of here? Like,
because they died.
Well, maybe, but it's like,
well, it's the sort of thing where you have to make, you're making up your own.
You have to make up a lot,
right? Yeah,
yeah. But like, nothing about the environment is helping me.
Yeah.
It's a very high abstract, like, it was abandoned or they were all killed or whatever. Like, they left, they're not here anymore, and it's just kind of like, it's unsatisfying, right? And so, it's like, it's just at that level of like, there's almost enough there for me to sink my teeth into, but it's not quite enough for me to feel like there's a mystery I can solve. It's just, the algorithm's just not there. It just doesn't have what it would need to give me that, which is fine. Like, there's a lot of other things the algorithm's doing, that are working very well for explorers like you. But for
I think
me,
it's interesting.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's what's dawning on me a little bit too is because there's way more, I guess I'll say, points of interest than there was when I had played so deeply the last time, which is, I'm going to say, maybe 6 years ago or 5 years ago. I don't know how long ago it was, pre-COVID for sure. And so I think when you see where the game has come with those points of interest from where it was, I think those algorithmically generated elements like you're talking about have a bigger impact. But for somebody coming in, I know you've played a little bit in the past, but like, let's say for all intents and purposes, you're coming in critically pretty fresh and having, I guess, different expectations, not good or bad, but different expectations for what you need out of sort of a narrative moment in an open world game.
Yeah.
Not landing as well, right? Because it's like, well, your expectations are like, this should give me more. And the interesting thing about that is a segue, not to necessarily plug other games in the genre, but, and I talk about Valheim.
It's not that I expect more. It's that it's unsatisfying that it doesn't give more.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Which is a slight distinction. It's not like, I don't expect the game to give it to me, because I know it's not an authored experience, like those I've worked on that are open world games, right? I know it's not that, but like the thing that makes,
it didn't go far enough.
Yeah. The thing that just sort of pricks my interest is like when there is more to get there. And, because it's not there, it's not that I expect it, in that way. It's just like, oh, right, of course, this isn't really going to have that. I kind of that like, yeah. I mean, there's just if there were even just a sign there was like, we came, we died, it would be like, oh, that would be so satisfying. Like, that would be enough, honestly. And it's the lack of that,
Yeah, totally. Well, the only thing I was going to say before, and we, not to get us off of the mind track for a second, but just for a microsecond, the interesting thing about the genre, to your point, which I think is a good thread to pull on, because I would say the foundational elements of the genre are in this game. because it was so big and still is so big, it's still one of the top 5 games played, right? As far as concurrent users, monthly active users, it's still amazing how well it's doing. Top 5, top 10, but mostly top 5. That obviously genre spinoffs are going to start happening, right? Where people will say, okay, your comment about narrative space is missing. Let's make a game that's in the genre that focuses on that problem and gives players more. And I would put Enshrouded a little bit in that, which came out maybe last year or maybe it was early this year. Played a fair amount of that with some friends, and that one has more kind of like linear thrust, a little more story. Like there's like, journals you pick up, and there's a lore to the world, and it's a lot more crafted. And it's very good. Wasn't one of my favorites. One that we just started though is the Return to Moria game. Not a plug for the game, but it does happen to be free on Epic right now if you so choose. And I don't know if you like playing Lord of the Rings games. I know you're a fan of the books, but for a nerd, and there's another nerd in the party that I was playing with, you're going into Moria long after it's been abandoned and trying to take it back. And the Balrog is somewhere in there, deep down, right? But you're coming to your point, these abandoned mining operations from these dwarves that are well curated. And it's sort of like a semi-linear survival game. Like there's a linear thrust, but you're still doing survival-y stuff. And you're basically rebuilding Moria. Like you can fix broken statues of famous dwarves, as you're going. And so I was just going to try to make the point of like, there's people that like the stuff you like who are trying to make this genre accommodate the things that those players like, and I think that's I love when genres start expanding out from their core to try to bring in and accommodate other player types. And, again, I haven't gotten far in the game, but as a merging, I guess I say, of genres, the Moria game, it's very interesting to see how when you put a very specific fictional context on top of a survival game, how it kind of resonates with certain people.
Yeah, what is, for example, I mean, Valheim is your one that's really,
I love Viking
really
stuff.
To. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Valheim is interesting because it still is a seed-based game, so you don't know what you're going to get, and I don't believe Moria is. Moria is a much more curated, crafted game. I don't know if it's fully linear, but so far it's very linear, and your survival expansion is kind of like piece by piece, in a section by section.
We're going to reclaim this hall.
Yeah.
That's really what the books are, talk about.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And, they mention all the famous Durin and they mention all the famous people. Gimli, like an old Gimli is in the opening cutscene. So it's like they really put you in there. But Valheim is interesting because for me, it was a perfect merging of both concepts because Minecraft, like you said, fictional context, not much, right? Like, yeah, there's villages and there's NPCs and they've added a lot more of that stuff, but there's not really a lot of the story you have to make up yourself. Or I'll say lore or, narrative world building. But Valheim, because it hit the Viking metaphor so hard, and you're literally in Valheim, right? Like you're in a legendary place to the Vikings. And the gods are the gods you would think, the creatures are the thing, they're named after all of the Nordic, Scandinavian creatures. Like it's all very cohesive, even though it's seed-based. There was enough of that fictional context where I got my Minecraft, but I got a really good theme on top of it that was consistent.
Yeah, that can make a big difference as well. I think, for me, and I did just go ahead and add that to my library
because they have like bosses, right? They have real achievements to go after. Okay, we're going to take out the boss in this region, so we have to build up to it. You can't just go to it. So.
But I mean, even with Valheim, with like setting it, because Minecraft doesn't really have, like you said, sure, you could I mean, there may be stuff on wikis and all that stuff. I actually don't. I mean, that's another thing. I don't like to go to something external to the game to
Yeah.
enjoy the game. It sounds like you don't either, in general, especially for exploration. I just want to if I don't want homework with my game. So, the fact that Minecraft is kind of so abstract and like there's no touchstone for, other than the sort of stuff I talked about, about survival and humanity in the sort of first episode, there's no like, oh, okay, I get this place. Like, and part of it is like, I had no idea there were deserts in Minecraft, and we spawned in a desert. I was like, oh no, like, I don't know what to do with this, and I've mentioned one that I played of these that I quite liked, which was the Dragon Quest Builders. And that's very directed. There's a whole story. I mean, that's all bespoke. There's quests that are all bespoke. You can do all the crafting you want, but there's even like basically many little puzzles to solve, like to get various quests done, in a way of like, oh, we need to build a house for this many people, houses for this many people. And like, how are you going to do that in this? Because the building spaces aren't huge. It's not an arbitrary infinite world because it was on a console at a time. I guess maybe I probably couldn't fit as much of that in. So it's just, there were limitations that they were dealing with that are a little different than Minecraft. Especially with them putting all the other stuff on top of it. So it's a very different game, in terms of like, but you can't just carve out anywhere stuff, and you probably can build a fair amount around. I really can't remember.
I think that's a great example of what I was saying too, right? It's right. Dragon Quest as a franchise was like, we want to tap into the Minecraft audience, but how do we do our version?
Yeah.
Still have a JRPG flavor to it, but give them building. And I think that's a good one.
Yeah. I think they found an interesting balance of that. Long term, the game, they had made some choices where you're like, oh, I don't know if I would have made that choice, because it ends up being extremely repetitive in the early game of each kind of chapter. But in general, pretty cool game, and I understand that they addressed that in the second one as well. So maybe I'll get back to that someday. I want to hear some of your stories about this. Mine on the mountaintop place I'm hearing about for the first time.
Well, I'll do a quick version, but like what, I'm not going to divulge especially if we're going to invite people in, I'm not going to divulge my location. I'm not that far away from spawn point, from initial spawn. So I think it's possible to find me, and I'm also not hiding because I'm on a mountain and I'm building on top of a mountain. But for whatever reason, what I often do, I did the same thing so I'm playing 3 different Valheim games over my history with that game. I have my solo game, I have one group game, and then another group game with the 2 different co-op groups. And the solo game is what I'm doing in this game in Minecraft is this, I think a little bit because I'm OCD, but also because I'm like, I have a min-maxer in me somewhere too, where I want to be very efficient with what I'm doing. Cause I kind of know the survival, like, pacing and sort of process of like what I'm going to be doing in this game. So I kind of optimize around those sorts of things. So what I usually do is find a mountain as high as I can, build my base on top of the mountain, defend it, basically dig away so it's defensible against creatures coming up the mountain, especially creepers, right, that destroy all of your hard work. And then I, build the basics, crafting in bed and all that kind of stuff. And I usually will make a tower. In fact, tonight, I think I'm going to go back in and start building the second floor of the tower. So it'll be higher on top of the mountain. And then what I do, which sounds like you do too, and many people do, then I basically go into the middle of the floor of my base level, and I dig down from there. And what I do is I do a wide spiral, kind of DNA spiral, where I just go down in a corkscrew, down, 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 down. And then as eventually, because I'm doing that pattern, you're finding ore, you're finding different materials you need. The game tends to be fairly good at distributing that stuff. If you're digging, randomly, you'll find eventually what you need. And then, of course, like you said, you'll eventually find points of interest like a dungeon or a cavern or whatever. And as long as you're careful, you're not going straight down or straight up, you usually can be pretty good. And then, and then I just kind of walk back up and I'm in my base, right? And then from once I get to a certain level, then I'll, basically start going out in the cardinal directions more linearly, and seeing what I find that way. But it's so I kind of have this shape in my head, and I try to make all of my mining and gathering really focused around this, column, I guess, of rock. So I'm as efficient as I can be about getting stuff. Sometimes it works, sometimes it does. Sometimes I've gotten unlucky with where I started, and the ground below me doesn't have what I need. But most of the time, and then the point about the mining carts and stuff and tracks that you said you probably won't engage in, there comes a point when you go far enough and you've hit it rich with diamond or something, and you're like, I gotta really like set up an operation to get all of this extracted. But oh no, I'm very far away. Okay, it's time for a mine cart.
See, but that's when I just build more whatever's crafting tables, and I just build the things, and I just this is where I live now, right? Yeah. So that's my that's kind of what I've done is I've made. I think I'm on my third.
Yeah, you called it site table. A, B, C.
Yeah,
D.
I'm on site D, but even I'm already at a point where I'm like, I think site E is coming.
What site was Jurassic Park?
So it's site B.
Site B. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So site A was just the tiny can I get through one night hut that was near the spawn point, and then site B was let me get to where there's something other than sand, and I built there, but all out of sand. I built with sandstone, but that was that was a reasonable sized building. That was the one where I was going to make concentric walls, building out, but then I was like, well, I should explore a little further. I'm next to this body of water. I've got some trees. Let me see what's on the other side of the water. And that's, I made a site C over there because just getting a bridge across that, and being able to explore from over there, I needed a place to go at night, so I built another small kind of place with a wall and then an inner building, as well. And then beyond that, I finally was okay, I can dig deeper here. It was near this huge chasm that I could see. I didn't discover it until after I started building. But then I built another now cobblestone hut because at this point I had discovered okay, if I dig in here a little bit, there's stone and I can just start building out. In fact, I think there was a pool nearby that was a pond or something that was ringed with stone. So I dug some of that stone. I was okay, I can start with that and then, start building something where I can feel safe. And then, and it's got an entryway with couple stone widths apart. Well, I guess just one apart, but 2 or 3 deep, a little tunnel to get to the door. And then you go and there's a room that's at ground level. And then it starts going down, it's down and then off to one side, there's a furnace. And I ended up adding an area where, cause I had some sheep somehow get in at some point. And I was trying to figure out how I could pen them up so that I could, instead of killing them for wool, I could just harvest their wool. I'd seen I could make shears. I was okay, I know what those are for, in the crafting menu. Mm-hmm. But by the time I actually got a space built for them, they had both killed themselves in my campfire. So I ended up with a bunch of mutton, but no sheep. And I haven't gotten any more in. I mean, I know I watched a little bit of Artemage's stream, and I know that there's ways to tempt them in, but I kind of wasn't paying attention. We hadn't talked about doing this yet, and so I wasn't really like trying to learn anything.
Yeah, there's an inherent
Yeah, I know you can
knowledge that
basically
people have.
maybe feed them or something, and they'll
Right,
follow you, something
yeah.
like that, right?
Because you can put anything. We haven't talked about that yet, and maybe next episode we can. But I want to talk about just kind of how inventory works, how the use of the inventory works, and how revelatory it is that basically anything in the game, including your things you're digging and mining, can be put in your hand.
Right.
You know, like as a concept, that's pretty amazing. That any basically atomic thing can be done. But yeah, so it changes the opportunity space. I love that we're playing so differently, and you know, you're kind of in more of the and that the game supports it, because you're kind of more in the nomadic, like I'm just going to go as I go and build new bases as I need them. And it'll be interesting. Hopefully we play long enough. It'll be interesting to see if there's a point where you decide, and the reason basically where you decide, okay, I actually need to hunker down in this site E because I've invested enough in this to do this all over again, maybe too much, or there's, you know, I don't know what will happen. Maybe you'll just keep moving as you need to.
But I mean, I end up experimenting with things at each place. Like, so it's at Site D was like, oh, I can build a campfire. What's that about? Like, that's not a thing I think I'd ever done before, that I could remember. And I just had lots of stone, so I just like had chests full of cobblestone, so much cobblestone everywhere. I'm at the point where I'm like just kind of tossing it out into the world at times. But I use it a lot to build as well, like mostly stairs, because I dig really deep at times. So I sort of have an E site already. Like I finally built my bed, which was kind of like a ways down from site D and below it, and kind of an enclosed space. And then I have also the this sort of site E, which has another crafting table. So like my third or possibly fourth crafting table, and a furnace. There's an archery something or other in there. Fletching table, something like that. I built one like, let's see what I can do with that. I don't have any feathers. I realized like, I probably can't make arrows because I don't have any feathers. You would need that.
Feathers.
And then one other thing. One or two others. One other table. I don't remember what table I made, and I don't think I've done anything with it because I was like, I don't know what that's for. I just built one because I could build it, and that's the area where I'm like, well, I don't want to have to also have an upstairs outdoor farming area, so let me figure out what I can grow down here. At that point, I had found some mushrooms. Those weren't like spreading. I put some dirt down in this area, but in that place that was destroyed, you know, the dead dwarves, disappeared dwarves, I did find like I found areas where stalagmites had been created because above them there were dripstone dripping. And I was like, okay, I could take that and I could water my plants. What else can I grow there? Oh, I have an oak sapling. Will that grow underground? I don't know. It hasn't much yet, so we'll see. That might still happen. So there's more that I'm like sort of figuring out, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but I'll abandon this in a heartbeat if I decide. You know, like I'm not making anything permanent. This is just like, let's see what I can do. Like, and then when I went to harvest, I grew some wheat in that space. I went to harvest it, and I think I instead like pulled it out by accident because I maybe hit the wrong button. Like I should have hit the right button. I hit the left or vice versa. Like, and I don't know. Like, I have no idea.
Maybe it wasn't done yet.
No, it was yellow and everything. I think it was done.
How that works. Yeah.
Because
you might need a sickle. I
used a hoe.
Yeah, that might have dug it up.
I
don't remember because I haven't. Yeah, I'm growing wheat right now, and I couldn't recall myself, and I'm also growing some melon and pumpkin.
Oh, okay. I have some melon seeds and some cocoa beans.
I don't think you can plant
the cocoa
beans. Yeah, I think they're just
that's for dye.
Things.
Oh, okay.
I think you can make cookies, but yeah, I mean, it's the interesting thing. I mean, banning it in a moment for sure. like the interesting thing about, well, one of the cool things about this game, I think, is there's so, like, there are, streamers and, people that play the game or whatever that are all about efficiency, right? And so they're only worried about, like, how do I progress forward and expand again my essentially power and opportunities and things. And the thing that I've realized about myself over the course of playing these games is that the building and the aesthetics of building something that looks, and maybe it's the level designer in me, um, that looks interesting and cool, and sort of like, I spend way too much time on this and in Valheim and other games, like, I definitely have multiple bases, basically, right, based on, especially because the continents, you're leaving continents, and but they have portals in that game, and so you can portal from portal to portal and get back to your home base. So that's a big difference. But I don't know if they have those. I don't remember if they have those in this game. Um, uh, but once I've committed, my point is that the reason that I, like, think hard about where I'm going to set up is because I do want to commit to my base. I'm going to make it look as cool as I can with the tools that I have. I'm going to spend a lot of time, sometimes even decorating it and, like, making it, basically I grow attached to it, And so that's why eventually, once I've put so much time into building all the different crafting tables, all the different, making it look cool, having an impact, on the aesthetics of the area, that's why I would build a mining system to come back to it, because I've, like, yeah, I've invested in it, So
Wow. Yeah,
interesting.
it's funny because I think, in terms of parallels, like Dwarf Fortress is the one where
Yeah.
I could see myself spending more time with that one because it is such a story engine and you are building, like, the one place, and
Yeah, totally.
But I think it supports it better because it's the thing it does, right? And this is, it obviously does a lot of things, but, like,
this isn't,
and I know that
as
there's,
much
like, an
about
adventure mode and, like, there's different modes and things like that. But I know that of Dwarf Fortress, but I mean, what we played was primarily, like, this is the thing, so
Yeah.
maybe if I, had a little bit more of that, it would make it easier for me. But because I don't know much about the game, I'm also just like, well, I know there's lots of different types of rocks. So, and I do remember, like, vaguely they're in sort of, like, layers, like strata or whatever. Like, if you find iron, you'll probably find more iron roughly around that depth, and if you find gold, you'll probably find more gold roughly around that depth, and etc. Like, and then eventually you'll find diamonds or whatever. I did find a type of stone you had not seen before, the other night, because I was digging down so deeply. It was getting so dark in there because this stone is really dark. It's just, like, it seems like it sucks up all the light. I don't know if they do something with the lighting to make it even creepier.
Yeah, I want to talk about lighting later, and, like, how, I don't know, and they've changed it over time, but yeah, I mean, I found andesite, which I don't think was in the game before.
Oh yeah, and diorite.
Granite, I don't think was in the game when I played last. Like, there's just different types of rock, and a lot of it is aesthetic. They might have different properties, but, just sort of like when you're building, you might want a different color and feel of things, but they also have other recipes that you can use with them. Yeah. I mean, it's just, as far as, like, the example of the live game that over many, many years has become more elaborate, and one might even say cumbersome, it's really, I think, an interesting case study in that. How do you keep a game that is this big with so many things that it can do accessible and usable by the player, especially a new player coming in, like, being overwhelmed? Like, what do I do? What is all this stuff?
Yeah.
Should I go to that?
It is very consistent, like you said. They have some clear rules, like, everything has to go in your hand, and you can, I mean, there's some stuff around, like, these are things that will break if you, chop at them, and these are some things that, you'll just get back. Like a crafting table, you'll get back, but like a fence, maybe you won't. I can't remember, but I've definitely come across things where I'm like, oh, if I destroy that, it just goes away. Like, there's not a lot of those things, but there are some.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I love about the genre, though, that I didn't put in my notes, but you're just jogging my memory on, is that because of the concept of starting with nothing and slowly building out what you have and what you can do, it's sort of by design going to be on-ramping from an accessibility standpoint for a player, right? Because you're starting with no armor, no weapons, no tools, and you get, oh, I get a wooden pickaxe. Okay, well, I can do only a certain number of things with that. Oh, now I have an iron pickaxe. Oh, okay, now I can do more things. But you're slowly getting, it's not like you're given too many complex things early on. You're kind of peeling that onion, the layers of the onion off as you gain, but you're also surviving. So it's like it matches well with onboarding for players in general, which is always a challenge when you have a deep game that has a lot of complexity to it from the get-go. What do you teach them first, and how do you give them a new thing? It's like, here, the new thing you're being given is the thing you just found because you're surviving, if that makes sense.
Yeah it does. No, it does. No, I do see the appeal. And I also will, just like I did with The Sims, I will just bullheadedly do the same thing every day. Trying to figure out, until I've kind of exhausted that thing, and then maybe I would try exploring, some of the other things it has. Like, I wouldn't mind finding some diamonds, so I don't have to make so many pickaxes, and things like that, right? Because I remember that as well, because I did definitely have diamond stuff, in the past. So yeah, it's been interesting. Well, we have exhausted like 2 of our topics, and we are over an hour in, and I was like, oh, we should do some email, but I don't think we're going to do that either, because it's getting late here. And
I'm glad we have some email on it, though. I'm looking at
them
we
do.
Real quick. Yeah, some good Minecraft stuff.
One thing
I cannot wait for the community to jump in.
Yeah, it'll be cool. So again, good to pull that back around. Go ahead and reach out through the Discord. There's a link in the show notes. What was I going to say? Nope, it's gone.
Sorry.
No, no. The thing I was going to say is that somebody did write in and explain that the earlier versions are available in the Java edition, that they actually have been maintaining those. So it is possible. And I may at some point over break, maybe, or my new PC comes next week, so it would be a good time to do it. I might download that and just set up an earlier version, even to set up a server that you could jump in on with a particular version. Maybe after the new year would be interesting to see, because I'm obviously I played some version that was much closer to that than to what it is today. So I'm really very curious, like, to see if I bounce off it in the same way or in different ways. I mean, not that I'm bouncing off of it. I'm just like, it wouldn't be my first choice to play it just because of the lack of direction.
I get it. Yeah. I don't know if you'd like it or not, but you might consider the Moria thing.
I added it to my library. That sound you heard was the email of Epic telling me that here's your receipt for $0.
Yeah.
I did add that to my list because I'm curious. I'm curious to know, like, if a more constrained, directed, narratively rich, even if some of the stuff is procedural or not, or whatever it is, if it is one of these sort of explore what you can do, but with more structure around it, that might be exactly my jam. In a way, that was what the Dragon Quest Builders was, in that kind of goofy Dragon Quest world. And I had a lot of fun with that. So it might be just the ticket. So I will, if I have time, I will take a look. I have it now for free. That's a good entry price for me to check it out. So we'll give that a try. Anyway, I guess we'll put a pin in it there. We'll talk about seeds and the generation algorithm and voxels and art style, audio and music. We still haven't talked about boop, 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 kind of the bubble wrap.
So good. Yeah.
In a future episode, as well as, I guess, lighting. I'll add that to my list now. And but in the meantime, you can send us reviews and email. We will catch up to those at some point. We will do a bigger email episode at some point if they stack up, to devgameclub@gmail.com. We're on the web at devgameclub.com, and you can find my buddy here twitching at twitch.tv/
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
Or at least you might sometime in January, probably, I'm guessing. I don't know. Are you planning to do
I
it
don't
this
know.
week?
To be honest, I really want to finish before the new year. So I don't know. I feel like I mean, what do you think? I could go to the last tower now.
Right, because you had set yourself a quest for these dragons, I think.
And I don't have to kill them all, I guess. And I think all my characters are over level 40. Some of them are much higher. So I feel like I could just go to the tower and finish it.
Probably. I mean, I don't remember.
I have all the I found all the companions.
Yeah, you found everybody. Yeah, maybe. I mean, it might be time. You're still doing your weird auto battling group as well.
I don't know how that's going to go in the tower.
Entertainingly, no doubt. So you can find him at twitch.tv/DimLongo Jr. with JR at the end. You can also join our Discord. There will be a link in the show notes. You can, when you're there, you can search out my name and PM me and give me your username for Minecraft, and I can invite you to that server if you are so inclined, especially as the holiday vacation weeks are upon us. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast, Aaron Evers, and our logo, the Discord, our merch store, all by Mark Garcia, along with some lovely bots. Have fun digging until you find Deep Slate this week, and good night.
Good night.